Judge Aileen Cannon denying without prejudice Trump's motion to dismiss counts 1 through 32 in his classified documents case. Her ruling coming in just moments ago. She said Trump's arguments were better suited to be argued later on in connection with jury instructions or with other motions. In other words, she punted the decision. It comes after Trump and Jack Smith faced off in a federal courtroom in Florida today. Trump's attorneys arguing to dismiss the entire superseding indictment against him, claiming that the Presidential Records Act gives Trump the authority to take and claim those classified documents as his own personal property. In their motion, Trump's lawyers wrote, President Trump exercised virtually unreviewable authority to designate the records as personal. In court, Trump lawyer Todd Blanche arguing, quote, presidents since George Washington have taken materials out of the White House at their own discretion. The DOJ quickly shooting back. The documents charged in the indictment are not personal records, period. They are nowhere close to that. Remember, Trump allegedly had nuclear secrets stashed away in some of those boxes. The DOJ emphasizing the gravity of the whole scenario. Quote, there has never been a situation remotely similar to this one. But those weren't the only arguments presented by Trump's team. They also resurrected an old favorite. But her emails, arguing that Hillary Clinton wasn't prosecuted, so Trump shouldn't be either. I should note, the FBI found that Clinton never discussed any classified material in the emails on her private account. Meanwhile, Trump's defense in public seems to be, if you say it enough, it must be true. Because speaking to Newsmax last night about these documents, Trump readily admitted he took them.
I took them very legally, and I wasn't hiding them. We had boxes on the front of and a lot of those boxes had clothing, and we're moving out, okay? Unfortunately, we're moving out of the White House. I had the right to do it, in my opinion, and in my lawyer's opinion, and everything else.
Joining me now is Christy Greenberg, former federal prosecutor with the Southern District of New York, and now an MSNBC legal analyst, and Emily Bazelon, legal writer with the New York Times Magazine. My thanks to both of you for getting us started this evening. Christy, that was a pretty fast ruling from Judge Cannon. I mean, she said she was going to rule promptly. We didn't expect it to happen just a couple of hours after court recessed, but Cannon, frankly, didn't really decide anything, right? I mean, what are your thoughts about this ruling?
Right. She dismissed the motion that Donald Trump made that essentially the statute is too vague. The Espionage Act is too vague as it is applied to him. And Judge Cannon in her order says, well, there are still these fluctuating definitions of statutory terms and the phrases as charged. It's like, what is fluctuating exactly? The statute's been applied over and over again. There are decisions on it. This isn't an area of law that's completely new. There are decisions here that tell you exactly what the terms are. And Donald Trump, it was explained to him from lawyers exactly that he could not keep these documents. So I'm not really sure what she's talking about as to why this is vague. It seems like this is a motion that could have been decided on the papers. But you're right, Katie. Look, she just punted this down the road, kicked the can down the road, which seems to be her MO in this case.
And Emily, you know, there's a lot of us scratching our heads as to why, and Christy just mentioned it right now, right? Why either of the two motions that were filed by Trump, the Presidential Records Act and the unconstitutional vagueness motion, why they even deserved oral argument in the first place. Do you think Judge Cannon is getting on-the-job training here?
You know, I think to be generous to Judge Cannon, she's trying to show that she's taking arguments seriously. She talked about that idea that these were serious arguments. And I suppose once you decide that, then you want to hear from the lawyers on that question. I think it's important to just emphasize how broad an argument Trump and his lawyers are making here. They are saying that as the former president, if he said that a record was personal, then he had the power to decide that, and that is not really something the courts can review. And so that seems to suggest that former presidents get to decide at the end of their tenure what to keep and take home with them and what the government gets to have. And that is really hard to square with the language of the actual statute here, which was passed in the wake of the Nixon administration to make sure that presidential records remained part of the public record and with the federal archives, not in the boxes in places like Mar-a-Lago.
In the Mar-a-Lago bathroom, to be specific, for some of them. Christy, I want to switch gears because I love that we have you here this evening, especially the New York DA Alvin Bragg filing a notice this afternoon, late afternoon, supporting a limited 30-day delay in the Trump hush money trial. It would give Trump's lawyers time to review a new batch of voluminous documents that have been provided in discovery. Trump's lawyers are actually asking that the trial be delayed 90 days, but they're also wholesale asking for a dismissal. Christy, I have to ask you, you spent a lot of time at the SDNY. What's your reaction to this filing of the notice from Alvin Bragg?
I'm really confused. I think there are a lot of questions here. According to this filing from Alvin Bragg more than a year ago, he asked for the full grand jury record relating to Michael Cohen's campaign finance convictions from SDNY. That included grand jury materials, subpoena materials, search warrant returns. Really, he asked for a lot of this information. And SDNY produced a subset of what he requested, and they produced that, as they should have, back in June of last year. Now, in January, Donald Trump serves a subpoena for apparently a lot of this same material. And in March, a few weeks ago, SDNY produced some materials that largely Alvin Bragg says are irrelevant, other than maybe a few hundred pages of witness statements that are relevant. But then yesterday, they produce another 30,000 pages of documents. And Alvin Bragg says, this is what I asked for more than a year ago. So there are real questions as to why, if he asked for it over a year ago, it's getting produced less than 2 weeks from a trial date. And that's not all. SDNY apparently has also said they have more to produce and that they are looking to make a production next week. Well, this trial is scheduled for the 25th. You cannot be producing documents on the eve of trial. This Cohen prosecution happened in 2018. There is no reason why they should be producing documents on the eve of trial. I think there really needs to be an explanation here. And just one more point. We say all the time that Donald Trump's tactic is delay, delay, delay. And that is largely true and largely frivolous. In this situation, Katie, as you know from being a prosecutor, you don't want to be in a position ever where you're producing documents on the eve of a trial that both the prosecution hasn't gotten an opportunity to review and the defense hasn't had an opportunity to review. So again, this doesn't seem like it's Alvin Bragg's fault. He produced what he had in his possession, but it's a real question as to why he didn't get these materials sooner.
Yeah, Emily, to kind of use that as a springboard, what Chrissy just explained, Bragg in his notice also talks about the fact, though, that delay should be attributable to Trump because Bragg turned over thousands and tens of thousands of documents last year, but it was only until mid-January of this year, just shy of 60 days going to trial, right, that a subpoena was served by Donald Trump on the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York, to get these documents, some of which it sounds like, according to Christy, and I would agree, there's a huge overlap there, right, from what was turned over in production last year and what was subpoenaed. But why is it then that this possible delay, which is going to be another win for Trump, the way I look at it, though, a little bit, Emily, it's still a state prosecution, though, right? It's not a federal prosecution. So maybe it doesn't go to trial this month, but maybe it goes to trial next month, still in advance of November.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I mean, I do think there's a pattern here where you're seeing the legal system tie itself in knots in some of the prosecutions of Trump. Yes, his lawyers and Trump desperately want delay and they are scoring wins. It is also true that in some cases we've seen the prosecutors or the judges also seem either in the name of being very proper about due process or because of what sounds like a kind of set of unanswered questions about why the Southern District didn't produce these documents earlier. It starts to seem like the legal system is part of the problem, and that is troubling given the stakes here.
Stunning comments from Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, who now runs the RNC, about voting in America. They're from a new video that's been posted online. In it, she spells out a goal, which, if achieved, would radically reshape U.S. voting laws and impose broad new draconian restrictions. And she implies that her father-in-law is on board.
once Donald Trump is president of the United States, once we have a huge majority in the House, because that's also something that needs to happen this election cycle, and we take back the Senate, then you can change the voting laws. Then you could have one day of voting. You could have paper ballots. You could have voter ID.
It's a breathtaking goal, calling for, quote, 1 day of voting, meaning an end to early voting and an end to mail-in voting. Roughly 100 million Americans voted early in 2020. She's also pushing the right-wing plan to enact stricter voter ID laws, which would have a disparate impact on communities of color. It's an extreme agenda. And I should note that later in that very same video, Lara Trump inadvertently revealed she understands the importance of early voting by telling Republicans to vote early this cycle so the GOP can gain power and change the laws in the future. And she didn't end at voting laws. She also talked about RNC plans to train poll workers.
Something the Republican National Committee was not able to do for a long time, and we are now. There was a moratorium on trained poll workers. So these are people who are not just standing in there kind of looking around. These are people who can actually go in there and physically handle the ballots. They can count the ballots coming in, count the ballots going out.
And that's not all. Under new MAGA leadership, the RNC is also bringing a prominent election denier into its upper ranks, hiring former Trump attorney and former far-right TV host Christina Bobb as, quote, senior counsel for election integrity. Bobb worked to raise money for the GOP's Arizona election audit. She publicly urged Mike Pence not to certify the 2020 election results. She even wrote a book called Stealing Your Vote, which pushed the big lie and included an introduction by Steve Bannon.
It's becoming glaringly apparent that Donald Trump absolutely crushed Joe Biden in the election. The Democrats and never-Trumpers installed the Dominion voting system in key locations with the intent to rig elections. It's treasonous for our federal government to take away our rights and hide it from us and lie about it and rig an election and install an illegitimate president. That is what happened.
Joining me now is David Jolly, former Republican congressman from Florida. He is no longer affiliated with that party. David, it's good to see you. I want to play those new comments from Lara Trump again, because they're that important. And then I want to get your take on the other side. Take a quick listen.
Once Donald Trump is president of the United States, once we have a huge majority in the House, because that's also something that needs to happen this election cycle, and we take back the Senate, then you can change the voting laws. Then you could have 1 day of voting. You could have paper ballots. You could have voter ID.
I mean, the perversion, David, of what she's saying with the backdrop of that music, that's bizarre, right? But I mean, putting that aside, they're saying it all out loud. They don't care who's listening. I mean, David, this is not funny.
Katie, there are crazy people running the RNC, and it's going to get worse. And I would suggest Lara Trump probably does not understand the principles of federalism when it comes to the administration of elections by our states. But let's take her at her word. Why are they chasing this when historically Republicans have done fairly well in early voting and mail-in voting, at least before Donald Trump came on the scene and told people to doubt it? They're doing it for two reasons. One is to sow doubt. You know, we kind of overlook this now, but part of Trump's election playbook, and now his daughter-in-law as a senior official of the RNC, is to sow doubt in the minds of Republican voters about any part of the administration of an election, so they have a fallback to blame should Donald Trump indeed lose. But really what they are doing here is Republicans understand. They understand that the more voters who vote, Democrats win. And the best case studies for that are our presidential elections, where Republicans have only won one popular vote in the last 30 years. When more Americans vote, Democrats win. And so what is behind everything Lara Trump said and Republicans' voter suppression laws and it going across the state capitals right now is trying to reduce the number of Americans to vote so that Republicans have a shot at being competitive. Because on policies, Republicans' extremist positions are simply out of touch, and they lose to Democrats when voters actually have the right to exercise their franchise.
I mean, the irony is not lost. I mean, this idea of rigging an election, because that's really what she's proposing, right? She's proposing rigging how the voting system goes down. But here's the ridiculousness about this position, right? Because in the last year, there are some D.C. Republicans, for example, that are saying that the party actually should do more to encourage their voters to do early voting. So what's the logical reason why MAGA leaders are ignoring those calls, and then you see Lara Trump say no early voting?
You know, it is all informed by Donald Trump's opinion on this, and whoever can figure out what's inside his head, I guess, would win the award. But to your point, take the state of Florida, where it was a swing state, a purple state. Now, arguably, Republicans have taken control, taken a supermajority in Tallahassee and the governorship for, 3 or 4 successive terms. They used very well, the Republican Party of Florida used early voting and mail-in voting much better than Democrats did. And so when Donald Trump, recall a few years back when he threw cold water on this, it was a lot of Republican state parties who said, hey, Mr. Trump, do not discourage this because this is a good tool for Republican parties. But Donald Trump sowed doubt, and ever since then, we have seen the attrition of Republican voters voting early and by mail. We have seen Democrats maximizing the opportunity, which is why you see Lara Trump saying, wait. If it's a tool by which Democrats can now beat us, we're going to see if we can ban it.
And, David, I don't believe in coincidences, right? And so we're in decision 2024. You have Lara Trump now, co-chair of the RNC, Michael Whatley, the chair, who's an election denier. You have Christina Bobb, now the, quote, senior person in charge of election integrity for the party. And then you have Lara Trump talking about poll workers being trained. And the thing that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks is when she talked about having these RNC-trained poll workers physically handling ballots. And that really kind of, freaks me out because it's just stacking it, right? It's them trying to stack it so that legitimate voting can't take place.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Katie. Why would it be important to Lara Trump to have MAGA Republicans touching ballots? I mean, think about that. Unless they're actually there to change the vote or to somehow impact the election through other means than the voters actually casting their vote, why would it matter the party registration of a poll worker? Look, in jurisdictions across the country, you have nonpartisan employees, volunteers who are poll workers, but then the parties also get to appoint in most jurisdictions an observer where they stand and they watch and they make sure the administration of the election is done with fidelity. Lara Trump is trying to shatter that model and suggest that they want MAGA Republicans touching the ballots after they're actually cast by voters. We know this all leads to one thing. If Donald Trump loses, he is not going to accept defeat, and he will say he was cheated, and the nation's going to face a crisis. If he does win, it's likely he tries not to leave office 4 years from now. This is the direction Republicans are going. The entire party owns this, not just Donald Trump.